4 days left until we get to the Super Bowl on Sunday, Eagles-Chiefs. Personally, I think this is going to be a banger, should be a fun one. In the meantime, let's talk some Pats. Mike Mutnansky makes the quickest return ever to the Pats Interference podcast. In a couple of minutes, we are going to break down or lay out our paths for the Patriots to make it back to the Super Bowl. These are 1 and 2 year plans, the 1 year plans being all out, immediate gratification, trade, draft, giveaway picks, sign for agents, do whatever you can just to get the Super Bowl. Obviously unrealistic. 2 year plans, a little bit more realistic. We'll break down those details and why. A little bit of fun, a little bit of serious football talk in there as well. Then Mike, betting expert that he is going to give you some angles for Sunday, and we get to your mailbag questions. Before we do all of that, however, I have some housekeeping to attend to. First thing is which this podcast will be weekly for the foreseeable future. Part of that is the offseason schedule, just the volume of events here. I want to get into the topics, that really deserve 30, 45, in this case, over an hour long discussion and covering Adrian Klemm coming aboard as the offensive line coach. Big development. We've talked about it. Offensive line coach, second most important position on an offensive staff, but not really worthy of his own podcast. That being said, he can be in a list of other smaller items, including Nick Caley leaving to go to the Rams. Yes, his contract expired. Yes, it appears the Patriots have an in-house replacement with Will Long, former lieutenant of Bill O'Brien's at Penn State, Houston, and Alabama. But, with those things happening last week, I wanted to touch upon them now. Don't have a ton to add in either instance. I can tell you Nick Caley was well thought of in the building. There were a couple of players I spoke to that hoped he was going to get the promotion to becoming the offensive coordinator. Obviously, that didn't happen. And if you can put yourself in his shoes as someone who's been open about his future aspirations, become an offensive coordinator, maybe a head coach one day, and, does well in his role, but you get passed over for promotion, not once, like last year when your boss brings in people who, obviously we've covered this a million times, ill-suited for their roles, Matt Patricia and Joe Judge. Then come around again, another year of experience. You dealt with all that. You were a good soldier. You were a good employee. And then you get passed over again for Bill O'Brien, of which, look, I would have made that decision, but you're probably going to go elsewhere. Okay. That's exactly what Nick Caley did. Yes, it's a lateral move going from the tight ends coach of the Patriots to the tight ends coach of the Rams. But in LA, he'll get exposure to a new system. He'll broaden his experience, his network, work for Sean McVay, which a couple of years ago was the only real requisite to become a head coach. See Cliff Kingsbury in Arizona. And that was it. That was the joke. And then it became real. We'll see how long that lasts. But I think it's a good move for Caley personally. One that was predictable after O'Brien came back in. Yes, he interviewed for offensive coordinator jobs at the Patriots and the Jets and the Texans. But given the ties personally in New England and Houston, he's another John Carroll guy, just like Nick Caserio. And then the Jets, who, of course, would love to know a little bit more intel on their division rivals, so they haven't beaten since Grover Cleveland was in office. Like, it behooved them to chat with Nick Caley. So I would just say good for Nick. He's on the way out. He was well regarded. We can talk about the lack of production from Jonnu Smith or Hunter Henry. Not really interested. We did that for 2 seasons. Onward and upward. As for Klemm, as mentioned, not a ton to add here, but friend of the podcast, Mike Giardi, the NFL Network, had reported the Patriots had zero in on him. Okay. And this took going back to Adrian Klemm, not only with a second interview that took place when they were coaching in the Shrine Bowl, but it sounds like another offer that finally got him around to leaving the University of Oregon after 1 year. Mind you, he was not only the offensive line coach at Oregon. And you could say, well, why wouldn't he want to go to the NFL? I mean, Adrian Klemm is a guy who has spent 11 out of his 14 years coaching in the college ranks. Some guys just prefer the lifestyle, working with the age group, whatever it is. He was the associate head coach at Oregon and the run game coordinator. What that means, not only, of course, responsibility, a little bit more money. So that's what they ponied up. It's my understanding he'll make north of $1 million, something also said by Albert Breer, Sports Illustrated. Offensive line coaches, as you've heard on this podcast, are the highest paid assistants on staff. This is why the Patriots zeroed in, saw he was worth it. Obviously played for the Patriots 2000 or 2004, first ever draft pick under Belichick. All that good and fun, someone that they trust. I think his experience with the Steelers is key here because obviously you want to see someone perform at the NFL level, but familiar with the system, Belichick, all that. It'll be great for the Patriots to have an experienced offensive line coach in the building who understands all parts of their operation and someone obviously that they trust and really like. How well does it pan out? I don't know, but I think it's a good move. So we'll leave it at that. Last one. Bill Belichick going on a podcast during Super Bowl week. I don't know what the odds would have been. I can tell you they were long. I'm talking probably 5 digits in there. There's a plus in the front, and yet he goes on Tom Brady's Let's Go podcast, heard on SiriusXM and then wherever you get your podcast, and chats for a long time with Brady and Jim Gray. And honestly, listening to Brady's podcast over the years, there's a reason he's the greatest quarterback of all time, not the greatest podcast host. I am certainly not in that conversation either, but this conversation was worth your time. Okay. It was certainly not as robotic as sometimes it comes off or Belichick does at the podium. Belichick, you could tell, was relaxed. He was honest. He was open. They were talking about one another. And it was great to hear them be positive after the real strain that happened behind the scenes, reached a peak in 2017 and then Brady lives 2 years later. They tried to whitewash some of that, which is fine. Blame the media. Everyone does it. Everyone's favorite punching bag. But it was real. And so was this. Belichick talking about how Brady taught him, how he taught him to see through the eyes of the quarterback, what were the more effective ways to coach him through certain reads. And then after plays, when they would come back on the sideline mid-game, Belichick would say, okay, what happened there in a third down? Say it was a rushed incompletion. Brady would go through 8 different items, the way the defensive tackle looped into his face, the edge rusher kept him from escaping the pocket because he stayed level with his rush. The outside linebacker was a yard further outside the hash than expected. The safety dropped in a little bit more than he expected. All these different things. And Belichick would go watch the tape after the game. Like, he was right in every single one of those freaking things. So he just said Tom saw the game better than anyone. And he said, quote, it was incredible. So it's great to hear them talk in an open, honest, and relaxed manner at any sort of time together. Was fantastic. Can't speak to where the relationship really is when the mics are off, but at least in this glimpse with the two of them together to reminisce about old days, give each other the appropriate flowers. It's just really, really cool. And I think wherever you're coming at this game from the standpoint of a reporter, Patriots fan, you don't like the Patriots, whatever it is, the greatest coach of all time, the greatest quarterback of all time, even coming off the seasons that they did, was just a good listen. So highly recommend that. Some other snippets up on the Herald as well as every other website. That just does it for the housekeeping. So let's get to the good stuff, how the Patriots can get back to the Super Bowl with Mike Mutnansky, his favorite prop bets, and why we disagree on picking the Eagles and the Chiefs on Sunday. Happy Super Bowl week to you and yours from the Pats Interference Podcast. After some housekeeping, the fun is here. Mike Mutnansky, the fastest guest to return to the Pats Interference Podcast ever. How does that make you feel when I say that?
Concerned for you that you got to bring me back already. Like, that's not a good sign for you. I'm thoroughly back. I have a lot of takes, pent up, unemployed radio hosts with a lot of time in my hands. So I'm thrilled to be back. Congrats to you and Karen and the Herald on a tremendous story on the inside of the disaster that was the Patriots offseason. And hopefully they're prepared to make things better, not just this year, but the next couple of years and put them back in contention to potentially be in the game you and I will talk about coming up on Sunday.
Well, that's the plan here today, right? Is get them back to the Super Bowl. How do they do this? I don't want to take the reasonable approach today. I mentioned this in the intro. We have 2 separate plans, you and I. We have 4 total. 2 of them abide by the 1-year plan. Next 12 months, how do you get to the Super Bowl? What would you do as the head of the Patriots? The second one, a 2-year plan. What are you doing over the next 24 months to ensure they get there at least once? Let's be clear, the Patriots are not subscribing to this approach or time frame. Obviously, they want to get back to the playoffs, but they are not going all out in the way that we are about to. Still, there are a lot of things to kind of keep in mind here. The thing is, though, it's fun. It's Super Bowl week. Everyone down in Phoenix, where, of course, we wish we were, is hawking and pushing products, and they're calling in, and you get the best guess, and this guy said that, and this guy, said the other thing, and then Matt Patricia's still getting buried by Darius Slay. All well and fun. So this is a week for fun, maybe not necessarily honesty. And so if you're upset by any of that, I'm sorry, but go get your own podcast. So what I would like to do, Mutt, is once we run through that, obviously hit some of the Super Bowl bets. But before we do all that, the 2-year plan for the Patriots to get back to the Super Bowl. Again, this is the last part of Mac Jones's cost control rookie contract. In my opinion, the window they should be shooting for, not in a way that, ignores the fact that the 2025 season and beyond are going to happen, but just emphasizes these next 2 years more. When you look at the 2-year window, what was bullet item number 1 for you in getting the Pats back to the promised land?
Yeah, so you're going to be way more detailed. I have some broad strokes, and I hope you can either tell me how dumb I am or we can agree on some of these things. But I think specifically, and let's start. Can we start with the Super Bowl for a second, just as a backdrop to this?
Oh yeah,
the Super Bowl this Sunday is extremely interesting if you're a Patriots fan, or if you're me or Andrew or somebody who cares about the team building, because there are two different completely approaches here. One of them, the Chiefs, they've got the all-world quarterback, maybe the best quarterback of this era, not named Brady. The next guy is going to be considered the best ever. And when you have that guy, things go a lot easier. Jalen Hurts is not the best ever. Jalen Hurts, they went out and drafted a wide receiver in the first round and won the Heisman Trophy in Devonta Smith. They traded for A.J. Brown. They have two useful running backs. They have an offensive line that can protect anybody. And so, to me, it is fascinating as a Patriots fan. Mac Jones is a nice player. He ain't Mahomes. And so, as I built out my 1 and 2 year plans here, it is much like look at the Eagles here, look at what they did, and say, how do we get the most out of our quarterback, right? That's how I view the prism of this game and how it affects the Patriots, because the Eagles, to me, are at some level, Andrew, a blueprint. If the Patriots are going to get back to this game, they have to do what the Eagles did, which is put around their quarterback top-level talent across the board.
I like your thought process there, because, it's funny, even the Chiefs, when they signed Mahomes to that giant contract, which I think we've swung almost in the opposite direction, where talking about rookie quarterback contracts used to be this niche thing in NFL podcasting and radio and TV. Everyone's aware of it now. It's not some huge advantage, because ultimately you want the quarterback like a Mahomes, like a Josh Allen, where you sign him to 10 years and you say, we don't mind breaking the bank, because the cap is about to jump astronomically in the next 2-3 years with the influx of new TV money. But also, that's the thing, man. That's why you draft the quarterback, to scour them. You go from coast to coast looking and scouting for them. You want the guy. They have the guy. They're abiding now by this contract, which included, of course, saying goodbye to Tyreek Hill. And they took a Moneyball approach, in which they said, okay, we have 1,800 yards to replace. Instead of trying to find one guy to be Tyreek Hill, of which, spoiler alert, there is none, let's find 3 or 4 guys who can replace that, maybe give us 2,000 yards. And it worked because of the power of the quarterback and Mahomes. But if you don't have that guy, which it's TBD here in New England, if we're being perfectly honest, like you said, you got to build around him. Quick parameters, which I should have said off the top. And again, sure, you don't have to abide by this as much as you want to. Good. Patriots right now, $28 million in effective cap space, according to Over the Cap. What that means is, once you have 51 players on the roster, which is all that's counted in the offseason, and you sign your projected draft class, where you can go in from the 14th pick, their first one, all the way to the 14th in the second round, et cetera, and project all those players signed for the allotted value you're expected to get in the draft, because all these deals are pretty much predetermined, that's how much money you have left. So that number for the Patriots, at $28 million, still in the top 6 in the league, but there's a closer gap between them and the guys, the rest of the top 10, where you're fighting with like a Baltimore and Seattle who have maybe 21 or 24. And so it's not a different tier, but they are a tier below the guys like Chicago, Atlanta, Houston, with all that money. So rules are set, 2-year plan. Mike Mutnansky, put on your GM hat. What are you doing first?
Yeah, so my kids play Madden a lot. And I've seen my youngest son, like, he legit turns the salary cap off and makes every trade he wants to make. This is sort of going to be where I start. And this, again, a broad stroke with maybe I can drill down to one individual player. But specifically, you and I talked about this last time. It has not changed. They don't have enough offensive talent. And I'll go back to the Jalen Hurts Eagles thing for a second, Andrew. Look at how much better he became the year they get A.J. Brown. I think certainly his own personal growth, his abilities, Devonta Smith being held, all those things are important. But A.J. Brown, alpha wide receiver on the outside, changed the outlook there. And so my 1-year plan, 2-year plan, 5-year plan remains, you've got to find that guy. Now, the problem with the parameters that you've given us here, 2 years, even if they draft a guy this year and they nail it, like they get the best guy they can get, he's probably not the alpha by year 2. So this leads back to something you've written about in the Herald, trading for DeAndre Hopkins. The guy that I'm like, and again, this is not realistic, but I would be calling Cincinnati every day and saying, you can't pay T. Higgins. Like he to me, in a fantasy world, T. Higgins is a Patriot, and they pay him an obscene amount of money as soon as next year. Now, Tyler Boyd's a free agent after next year. So there's a potential you can get one of those Bengals guys. They're going to pay Jamar Chase, going to pay Joe Burrow. They're going to revamp the offensive line. They can't pay all 3 of them. But in the 1 or 2 year plan, and you want to go 2 years first, they've got to find a way to get that alpha. And of all the guys that I've looked at all the names, the potential free agents, the trade targets. The one I keep coming back to is T. Higgins, because I think he just gets lost in the shuffle. He's got every physical skill you want. He's not quite at Jamar Chase's level, but boy, as number 1 in an offense, I think that guy could be awesome. So it's not changed. It's fantasy football, but T. Higgins and or a one receiver is still the first thing they have to be looking at right now in the Patriots front office as we're speaking right now.
So we'll run through the rest of your plan, and then I'll jump in mine. But I'll give you a little tease that we are aligned, and the first step is get that weapon on the outside. Someone who I've described as you've got some gravity to you. Okay, the safety's either backing up or he's cheating over to your side. That opens up space, of course, over the middle or in the opposite side. And so for me, the T. Higgins conversation is interesting. Who knows what that value could be? They're having conversations. There's a template with the deals, as you mentioned, with A.J. Brown, the Eagles acquiring him on draft day. But the Patriots also would need to then lock him in soon for an extension, which T. Higgins' agent will know, his camp will know, and they'll have leverage baked in as soon as the Patriots or whatever team acquires him. A, I don't think that's going to happen. B, I would, of course, not be against it. But C, the money is going to be interesting because I've said time and time and time again, the Patriots don't pay for number one receivers. But let's say they do it anyway. They trade for him. They give him that extension. And you have him here in this 2-year plan. You keep him on the same year, this current year, rookie contract, the final year, very cheap. Next year, 2024, with the extension, you can still backload that deal and have a ton of cap space, even though you just traded for and signed T. Higgins to an extension to sign other weapons. So this is a deal that could be, again, you're kind of kicking the can down the road, but cost effective for the Patriots within this window while you add a legitimate number one talent.
Yeah, I go back to the Bill O'Brien hiring, which we have not, it's happened since we last talked. Thank God they brought this guy in. And hopefully he has a say, and Nick Saban recently has come aboard this idea that, look, defense is not what he used to be both in college and the NFL. You've got to surround your quarterback with super talent. And I hope, Andrew, that doesn't Bill O'Brien, doesn't he come here and tell Bill, hey, Bill, the way you've gone about it, it's different. And I don't know, maybe you've talked to people around the building. Is Bill Belichick going to respect Bill O'Brien's opinion? If Bill O'Brien comes in and says, hey, even Nick Saban thinks we got to have upgraded offensive talent, is Belichick willing to buy in? Because when you say they've not been willing to pay number one receivers, I want to scream, well, they have to. It's a different game now. So does Bill O'Brien have that gravitas to be able to say to Bill Belichick, hey, we got to do things differently, especially offensively?
He will, maybe not in that specific area, even as someone who benefited from DeAndre Hopkins all those years down in Houston. And then, of course, dealt DeAndre Hopkins to Arizona. But the fact that O'Brien has as much input with the staff, which you go, hey, it's his offensive staff. What are you talking about? No. The boss is Bill Belichick, whether you coach offense, defense, or special teams. But he brings in Will Long, 37, former Alabama offensive analyst. Before that, an assistant with the Texans. Before that, at Penn State. There's a theme here. Yes, he's following Bill O'Brien wherever he goes. Says a lot. And it was an easy door to step into because Nick Caley left it open on his way out when he left to go to the Rams. But, Bill O'Brien has a lot to say, perhaps as much, if not more say, than any recent coordinator to kind of step in this late in the Belichick era. So, yeah, I think he might have some input there. But the system, the roster building philosophy, I have a hard time seeing Bill O'Brien have much sway there because if we go back to Bill O'Brien, the GM, that was a disaster. People want to talk about Bill the GM versus Bill the head coach in New England. Okay, not as bad as Bill the GM and Bill the head coach down in Houston in those years.
Yeah, that was not a good couple of years there for Bill O'Brien after he rebuilt Penn State. So, I guess we agree at the top of it. T. Higgins would be my guy. Hopefully you have some more names. If T. Higgins is not realistic, some more realistic names. After that, it's sort of the next group of things, they feel like housekeeping items that they have to get done. They have a bunch of soon-to-be, you mentioned extensions for guys, Andrew. And of the guys that they next 2 years are going to come up, don't they have to re-sign Kyle Duggar? Yes. I don't think they have a lot of, to steal Mike Lombardi's overused term, blue chip players. Now, maybe they can get in the draft last year was a step in the right direction. And maybe there's guys who emerged this year that we like could potentially be blue chip players. I think Kyle Duggar is a blue chip player. I think he eventually is going to be one of the better safeties in the AFC. I don't want to risk getting to a point where he's got this last year of his deal. Are you going to franchise tag him? I'd be looking at extending Kyle Duggar and making sure his contract's taken care of. And the same thing, I can't remember to say this, with Michael Onwenu. The offensive line, it's not good. It's not a good offensive line. Go ahead. It's not,
he's on my list.
It's not a good offensive line. And I hate offensive line talk. Do it. I hate it. I just want to watch quarterbacks play. I don't care about the big fat guys in front. Here's what I know. The Patriots offensive line was not very good. And maybe the best foundational piece you have is Onwenu, Just looking briefly earlier today at the guys who are going to be free agents, Duggar and Onwenu both stood out as guys like, well, if I got to sign some players, these two, the two guys that I have on my list in the next couple of years to make sure I re-up, because if we're going to take all this time about how good Mac Jones has to be and the offense has to be, you got to protect him. See Joe Burrow and the Bengals. I'm signing those two guys. They're worth spending big money on, I think.
Well, let's stay here then, because I had a couple more names on this list, and one of them will depend on the performance next year, and the questions about him are largely due to health. But, the offensive tackle situation was terrible. It wasn't all the time due to Trent Brown. Like, that guy played 98% of your offensive snaps. There's talent there that I think still needs to be cultivated and developed, like we saw, maybe not even at the 2018 levels, okay? But the player that flashed maybe even a little bit in Vegas and we saw in 2021, granted he was playing right tackle, but you get a real offensive line coach in there like Adrian Klemm, I think you see some of that. It's worth saying, hey, Trent Brown, if you really want to stick around here, maybe we'll extend you now. Opens up a little bit of cap space for us. You get another year or two. I think it's still wise to draft an offensive tackle day one or day two. But Duggar, Onwenu, Trent Brown, Ramondre Stevenson is the other name. And he's not extension eligible yet. But again, within this 2-year window, they play out the 2023 season. You engage him and his agent before that final deal. Be like, look, Josh Jacobs is on the market. He's probably not going to get more than a year or two. And that was maybe the best running back in the league. If he gets $8-9 million, great. We'll give you long-term security. We'll give you a comparable contract. We'll allow you to continue to grow in the system and be our number one. What do you think about that? And for the Patriots, that's good business because, as I mentioned, the cap is going to go up by perhaps $25 million next year. And a couple agents have told me maybe close to $300 million in 2025. Well, all these deals in the next couple of years, you're right. That's gambling money, that's TV money, that's everything.
Let's go.
Are really important. If you can extend guys in the next couple of years, that is good business for teams across the NFL and specifically the quarterback position. But if you don't have that settled, you might as well knock all these out. And I'm right with you. Duggar, Onwenu, and Trent Brown. I don't have figures next to these like I do for some other players we'll talk about, but just keep them in mind. Even though the conversations aren't happening this March and this April, they're coming up soon.
So those are the two biggest things to me. Are getting talent for Mac Jones. And then obviously offensive line's got to sort of be rebuilt and bring back some of your own players. I have some weird coaching / team things that are probably going to sound ridiculous to say out loud, but since it's this podcast, I will do it. We just spent a year. It was a wasted year. You've written about it. I've talked about it. A wasted year on offense because they didn't quite know what to do at the offensive quarterback position, offensive coaching position, quarterback coach. Patricia and Judge were a disaster. You get a mulligan because you're Bill Belichick. He can't do that again, and Kraft can't do that again. And so as ridiculous as this is going to sound, okay, I totally understand this. They've got to start planning for post-Bill O'Brien right now. And I say that because I've seen it happen so many times, Andrew. You get 1 or 2 good years as a coordinator in the NFL for a young quarterback, you get hired immediately. Like that is not changing. We've seen some defensive coaches that have been hired, but it's still it's trending towards offense. It's trending towards the McVay tree. And so I understand that there was some story out there, and maybe you can confirm or add some color to this, that they were worried about Bill O'Brien a year ago because it was going to be a one-and-done situation. Newsflash, if he coaches well and Mac Jones has a Pro Bowl All-Pro year, it's going to be one and done unless there's like a little handshake deal saying, hey, I'll stay for 2 years. So I just look at what happened in Buffalo. Like they lost Daboll, but at least Ken Dorsey was sort of waiting in the wings. Maybe not as good, but it didn't completely fall off. They played their worst game of the year and the most important game of the year. I don't blame Ken Dorsey for that. They had a bad game up and down. They were not ready to play for some ridiculous reason at home against that team. So I think you have to already be sort of planning out, okay, when Bill O'Brien goes, who's the next guy to step on offensively? Because you cannot have another year like this. Is that way too talk radio reactionary to a team that just hired their coordinator like a week ago?
No, and first of all, this is a safe space. So the weirdest things you want, I will definitely cut them up and put them on Twitter as the teasers for all these different episodes. No fear, I will absolutely spotlight any sort of humiliating moments. But secondarily, it's a great point on its own. Thirdly, it's a point that Karen Garigi, my colleague at the Herald, made on Sunday. Went through a list of people because, again, the failure to have a succession plan for Tom Brady, for Rob Gronkowski, all of those years that Gronk
Josh McDaniels
retired. Didn't even draft any. Josh McDaniels, exactly. And it's not only the offensive coordinator component of this, which is obviously a big, very important job. Bill O'Brien is going to be the quarterback's coach. And again, if Mac Jones is here and he has another new quarterbacks coach in year 4, who is that guy? Now, some of the names that Karen listed internally, because that's where you have to start with any sort of Belichick coaching search, as we saw, it was just ex-players or friends around the league.
Yep.
Name that I would keep in mind, because he coached quarterbacks at the Shrine Bowl and actually goes back with Bill O'Brien when he was a player and O'Brien was a head coach at Penn State and recruited him, is Ross Douglas. Now, I would not feel comfortable to say, yeah, this will happen, this will work, because Ross Douglas has been here for 2 years, one of which he coached on defense. But the next year, Belichick felt comfortable enough to make him the youngest position coach in the entire league. Not assistant receivers coach, just wide receivers coach. Now he's coaching quarterbacks and being the offensive coordinator at the Shrine Bowl. I don't know how much that says, but I know it says more than a lot of people would have expected. So maybe that experience working with O'Brien, if O'Brien does leave in 2024, maybe it's 2025 or beyond, is just a name to watch, because no one else in-house. You know, there are a couple other assistants. Tyler Hughes is a guy who coached the high school and college level and worked with some quarterbacks, but is still in the kind of offensive assistant, doesn't have a position. There's no one else that's as obvious. And you're not importing the system. So you're replacing 2 jobs with O'Brien. And it's a great point, because they need to have a succession plan. And that's really what's dragged them down as much as the bad draft the last 3-4 years.
And they botched the second year of their young quarterback's career. They just did. Again, reading your story and the work you guys did, just watching it all year, they effed it up so badly that they just can't let it happen again. And as a secondary piece to that, this is not for Bill Belichick, obviously, because I don't want Bill making this call, but the Crafts need to, if they haven't done it already, this is the year to sit down and go, who's our head coach after Bill Belichick? Like, I think the reality, if you're the biggest Patriot fan ever, the honk who's wearing the cutoff sweatshirt, watching the games, in Bill we trust tattooed somewhere in your body, even you have to admit, we're getting to the end here. And so just like with the offensive coordinator, quarterbacks coach, they need to start working on their list internally, whether maybe it's as simple as, hey, Gerard Mayo's going to be here. He's our next head coach. But they've got to have that sincere realistic conversation that Bill's not going to be here forever. We love him as our head coach. But when he goes, as Karen wrote on Sunday, who's the next guy in line at all these different positions we botched recently? And it sucks to do it because you're thinking about the next head coach, but the Crafts have to start thinking about that, Andrew, because it's such an important piece of them getting back to being in the Super Bowl. That should happen these next 2 years. I'm not saying Bill should go, but they should have their list ready to go, a working list that if Bill is gone, here's the next head coach. That should be part of the next 2 years, identifying what they're looking for, and then individually who it might be, as simple as Gerard Mayo or somebody on the staff right now.
Okay, I want to hit this quickly and to go back to the end of your 2-year plan here, but you're going to handle most of the betting segment coming up about the Super Bowl props, winners, gets the spread.
Sure, yeah.
Right now, if I could hit pause and go have a quick conversation with my fiance about how much money I could bet comfortably about the successor to Bill Belichick, I would put close to the maximum amount I am allowed with a wedding coming up and a honeymoon on Gerard Mayo. I think it is not a handshake agreement. I don't think there's anything written. But I was very wrong a couple of months ago in saying, I think he could be gone. There was frustration, I will say, in his part in feeling there was a ceiling and he had outgrown his current role when he was allowed to in New England. A lot of that has been smoothed over as of late, as we heard from Karen about new responsibilities and role change. I don't think the title changes, but a lot of people in that building believe he's the next guy. That doesn't mean an opportunity will come up in the next head coaching cycle next winter, and Gerard has to take it because it's an offer he can't refuse, and his profile is only growing at this point. But I think the Crafts will do all but anything to keep him here. I think they did. It worked. And like you said, Bill's getting towards the end. So anyway, not taking any more money.
I'm telling people that are listening right now that when Andrew says that the way he said it, you should take note. There are a few people tied in this Patriots beat. Andrew is one of them. So when he says, I'm going to bet our honeymoon money on Gerard Mayo being the head coach,
maybe we'll just go from 7 days to 4. How about that?
and by the way, like if based on what I know about Gerard Mayo, having watched him coach, talk to people who've been around Gerard Mayo, both on the business side and the football side, it feels like that'd be a sharp move, because I think he's someone who can command respect on both the offensive and defensive side of the ball, being a former player and a recent former player. There's a respect in there amongst guys who'll be playing for him. And I think he'll be able to delegate. Gerard Mayo, from people I've talked to, he's not a type of guy that's going to have to be hands-on is not the word, but over your shoulder. He's gonna let guys who are doing their coaching do their coaching. So if that's the case,
micromanage.
Yeah, thank you. See, that's why you're the journalist and I'm unemployed. He won't micromanage these guys. So if that's the case, if they've identified him, I'm okay with that. The end of my 2-year plan, these are dumb things that no one wants to hear about. But Nick Folk's a million years old. They need to figure out what the kicker is going to be long term. And punting wise, like, is Jake Bailey's back bad? Is he just a crappy punter all of a sudden? Because they're special teams. It was tough some Mondays talking to Matthew Slater on the radio because you didn't want to come out and say it, but it's like they dropped off big time. And I don't think it was just Cam Acord. I think it was a talent drop off too, and performance drop off. And so, like, kicker and punter, the next 2 years, I'd be shocked if we sit here 2 years from now and Nick Folk and Jake Bailey are still that special teams unit. So that's going to have some turnover, and it's been a strength for them in the last 2 decades. They got to find a way to find replacements for those two, either for the first year or second year, because they don't feel like long-term options at that position.
So he hates offensive line talk, but he will dive head first into special teams. Just Mike Mutnansky, everybody.
So that's a lot of what I wrote down. I'm sure you're more specific. Yeah. I painted with a broad brush here, but I think number one with the bullet is still the offensive talent. So I'm looking forward to hear where you want to take this team the next couple of years.
Okay, so I'm going to go through my 2-year plan, and then I'm going to jump straight to the 1-year plan because there's honestly a lot of overlap here. I didn't want to project, and I started to look at 2024 free agents who might come available. Some people could be resigned. What would the dollar value be? Again, with the question marks about the salary cap, people staying or going. What do the Patriots roster look like in a year? Too much uncertainty there, let alone the 2024 draft. So there's one big addition I'm going to have from this 2-year plan when we shrink it down to just 1-year plan, of which there's a couple more rules I just want to lay out before we get to that. But 2-year plan, I already said, attacking the number one receiver market, which right now is strictly a trade market, okay? The best receivers available are going to be Jacoby Myers and Juju Smith-Schuster. Jacoby, hats off to him, leading receiver for 3 straight seasons. I've talked about this before. He seems to be in this weird friend zone with NFL evaluators, so I like you, but I don't really want to pay up to marry you or call you a number one. And you know what? Yep. He's not, and that's fine. There's a player, though, who plays a lot like him, and I think has already hit a ceiling and is in a tier above Jacoby Myers when you look at body type, positional, versatility, strong hands, excellent route runner, and that's Keenan Allen. Okay, so Keenan Allen, like DeAndre Hopkins, who you mentioned, but you're not trading for, is going to turn 31. He is one of 2 receivers since 2017 to average 70 yards per game every single season. Now, he did miss 7 games. Health has been a concern for him, but his performance at age 30 did not. His per game averages were higher this year than they've been the last 4 years for catches, yards, first down. So he is still much the same player, and his contract would run through this season and next. That's the window. The reason I'm trading for Keenan Allen, who now people are coming to realize, even though I talked about this a month ago, not that my reach is particularly far, but it's obvious if you just look up his contract, he is a cut candidate with the Chargers, who are in the left lane straight towards cap hell. So if you're the Patriots, I say, I don't want to wait for you to decide to cut him, okay? I have to then fight with the Giants and the Falcons and the Texans and the Bears and maybe Baltimore, who still needs a receiver, or the Seahawks, to sign for his services, with some of those teams have a better quarterback than we do. I will do a deal right now, calling to the Chargers, like the Amari Cooper deal happened with Dallas and the Browns a few years ago. Now, Amari Cooper was about to be on the hook for $20 million. Keenan Allen's salary is going to be about $15.5. That deal, though, was 2 fifth-round picks and a swap of 6-rounders. So what I'm saying here is I don't think this takes a whole lot to get Keenan Allen off the Chargers books into your locker room. And of course, on your books, $15.5 million is a lot. But then they don't have any cost if they want to cut him in 2024. You can wash your hands, no real dead money, you're fine. So he's a guy who fits in the slot, gives you number one upside. Of course, you'd rather have the younger guy who profiles similarly in Jacoby Myers. I just think if you sign him instead of trading for a Keenan Allen, or we talked about Hopkins and obviously T. Higgins, if that's available, Jared Jeudy fits in that same mold, you're just kind of running it back. And we've seen what this looks like. Okay, you can't count on internal improvement to make the jump you need to get to a place that you haven't even sniffed the last 4 years in terms of getting a playoff win if you just have the same guys on your offense.
Yeah, I'm not going to push back at all. I mean, Keenan Allen, and here's the other benefit there, because they're up against the cap. They have other young receivers who emerge, like Josh Palmer. I don't think is a household name, but I'm sure in LA they're thinking, well, if we cut him, we can get like 80% of Keenan Allen's production at really a percentage of the salary that Josh Palmer is going to make versus Keenan Allen. So you have a benefit there because they have other in-house guys, obviously going to pay Mike Williams a boatload of money. So they have other skill guys. They probably are convinced like, hey, we have Austin Eckler, who's like a receiver out of the backfield. So I think the other offensive weapons there probably do raise the chances he gets traded. They feel like they can find a way to win without him. The issue here is going to be he is going to be highly sought after. And if we don't think that Bill's going to want to pay receivers, is Bill going to want to get in a bidding war with other teams to trade for Keenan Allen? So when you that Amari Cooper comp, I do that in a second. I just feel like now because the league recognized how important these receivers are, that price could be higher. So hopefully Bill's willing to pay it. I have no issues with Keenan Allen at all. Great player. And they had multiple chances to take him years ago in the draft. They missed him twice in the second round. So I'd be fine going back to him, finally getting him on the Patriots team.
Yeah, Keenan Allen, someone Bill has spoken highly of in the past. Yep. And look, he'll speak highly of a lot of people behind a podium. But, I remember talking to Patriots defensive backs in that last Super Bowl year, 2018. I did a story about, okay, give me some underrated guys around the league. You got a lot of respect for, don't get a ton of shine. The secondary guys named Keenan Allen to a man, like Gilmore, McCourty, Pat Chung, just tons of respect. 4 years coming up on 5 is a lot of time since then, and it's a different crew in there. But I think his game will age well, and you see this even some of the deeper numbers. His average separation last season, 6th highest in the league, ahead of Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, and Justin Jefferson, according to Next Gen Stats. So I am in on Keenan Allen. Again, it depends on cost. $15.5 million would take us from $28 million in cap space, effectively, according to Over the Cap. Let's just say it about 12, okay? So you trade for Keenan Allen, solves one issue. Jacoby Myers wants to come back at a discount, great. If not, we have his 2.0 version.
Got it.
Mike McGlinchey, offensive tackle. Get him in the building. He's projected, according to PFF, 4 years, $62 million.
Big money tackle. Let's go.
$15.5 million per year. But the cap hit in year one, as I just mentioned, when we're talking about this hypothetical extension for T. Higgins, can be much lower. Teron Armstead, last year with Miami, highest paid tackle in the league, one of the best in the entire world in this era. 5 years, $75 million. His cap hit in year one was in the neighborhood of $2-3 million. So if you look at McGlinchey, again, you don't want to always kick the can down the road, but let's bump that up to 4. Okay, now we're down to $8 million in space. Go get Cam Sutton, Steelers cornerback, equally good in man and zone. He's a capable number 2. This is another position like receiver. I think you just start throwing, as the Patriots have in the past, but maybe hopefully not this offseason, a bunch of guys at the wall, see who sticks. We're going to have strength in numbers. The way they pivoted to zone at the end of the season really worked. I think you bring him in. He's projected 3 years, $25 million. Again, year 1, 2 to 3 brings us down to, talk about $4 or $5 million left. At that point, I'm with you. You look at extensions for Duggar, Onwenu, Trent Brown, Stevenson in a year. McCourty and Slater, just say one more. We'll get one more. You can have Thursday practices off. You can go to the spa on Saturdays, whatever the hell you want. You want to just take games off, that's fine. Like they're core guys that I think you can bring back. Devin, especially, you don't have a free safety in house, but there's no way Matthew Slater was at the core reason for all their special teams troubles. Just say, drive the culture one more year, help us out, and then call it quits together in 2023.
Doesn't it feel much more likely McCourty comes back than Slater? And I said for 2-1, Slater was much more emotional at the end there. And I think I felt like a finality to it in the aftermath that emotionally got. And then I did see with McCourty, this probably means nothing to him, but he comes back next year. He has the chance to be the highest paid safety in the history of the NFL. If he has a similar
total money,
I think total money, if McCourty plays one more year at a similar deal last year, highest paid safety in the history of the National Football League. So money is not going to dictate it, but to me, it feels like from where I sit, McCourty more likely than Matthew Slater to come back. Is that how you see it from what you've heard?
It is not. Though I would love that title too. Give me highest paid whatever, and I will ride off into the sunset, put that on a bumper sticker saying this is who's driving this car. And also, of course, I meant call it quits in 2023 after the 2023 season. Obviously, you run it back. You call it quits after the year's over in early 2024. But Matthew Slater, according to Mike Reese from ESPN, good friend, has been in the building constantly and is talking about he would accept the coaching role. And we've done this with Matthew Slater for a while. I also just think the wear and tear in his body is different than it is when you talk about volume of snaps than it is for Devin McCourty, who had minor shoulder surgery, something Kara Garegan confirmed from us. Mike Reese also reported. But Devin's doing the rounds of media. Like, he knows what he wants to do once his playing career is over. The fact that he's getting these reps in now as intensely as he is, I think tells me that he's ready to go off. And he knows, at least looking at this current roster, you're 8-9, you weren't that close. Okay. Like, that offense was that bad. They're going to need a real infusion of talent. And it's always fun. I just, it's not a bigger commitment for Devin McCourty than Matthew Slater. It's not. Those guys are absolutely 100% all in. I just think, given the state of his body, because he's had God knows how many shoulder surgeries at this point, and the way he's been spending his time in the bye week and now in the offseason, I think he's ready, and I think he's good at it. And you know what? Good for him.
Yeah, it's the bar is pretty low. Former players who can go in there and do it well. Like I think like Greg Olsen is a great example. A year ago, no one talked about him. Now, because he has a couple good games, he's the greatest thing since sliced bread. McCourty would be excellent. His brother is really good on Good Morning Football. He'd be excellent doing it. So I'm with you. Try to get him to run it one more time. But I don't think that's the most extreme of your 1 and 2 year plan ideas, at least that you previewed before we came on today. So I think you need to tell the people the most ridiculous idea you have about the next year for the Patriots.
All right. Well, let me give you an appetizer first.
Okay, good.
You know, I'm going to give you 2 apps, one of which is draft, because I know people want to hear this. We've got some mailbag questions about the draft. 2 corners in my mind that have my attention from the little I've watched so far and read about and talked to some friends I still have in the college ranks about. Illinois' Devin Witherspoon. This dude he has that dog in him, as they say, like at corner. Man corner, hits like all hell, turnover generating, just awesome player. Brett Bielema is still at Illinois, could give the Patriots some intel. He might not last to 14. I like him a lot. The other one, Joey Porter Jr. out of Penn State. Yes, son of former Steelers outside linebacker Joey Porter, 6'2", ball skills for days, can play man, good in zone, like has been good from the jump. That's a guy I think you can plug in. And again, throw him at the wall, see how many number 2 corners stick. And I mentioned Cam Sutton. You could also throw Jamel Dean in there. I've written about this before, but just build up that corner depth. The second appetizer, this could be a full meal here, is a different trade, not the one that you know about, which is coming. This is a NBA style salary dump of Jonnu Smith's contract, which, if you'll remember, we had, and this had to be the Bill O'Brien era, but I don't think he had GM powers just yet. So this was not his idea, but he was around when it happened. The Texans traded in 2016 or 17, Brock Osweiler and a 2nd round pick to Cleveland for nothing. It was a get his money off our books. You buy a 2nd round pick. Obviously something came back. I don't remember what it was, but it was this whole, what a brilliant idea. And everyone who's watched or followed the NBA goes, yeah, that happens all the time. They're called expiring contracts. Okay. It's just a way to get money off your books. So if you're the Patriots, you don't need to give up a 2nd round pick. But Jonnu Smith, who is going to definitively be on your books, something like $17 million coming up this year. They kicked money into 2024. So a lot of this is guaranteed. You can't just outright cut him. It's going to be a ton of dead money, no cap savings. You can't do it. Trade him and a conditional 3rd round pick to the likes of teams I've already mentioned multiple times, a Houston, an Atlanta, a Chicago, where if Jonnu cracks 300 receiving yards, that's it. Something he's not done in New England yet, then that converts to a 4th. That gives you $10 million in cap savings this year, $6 million in dead money, but you take it. And if you say, okay, well, that's too much, that's too soon. If you wait a year, the numbers really aren't that different, according to Over the Cap. So I say get this done now, create $10 million in cap space, bite the bullet with the dead money, free up a spot, maybe extend Hunter Henry for a year, who's at least been productive, as we've seen in this offense when featured. And you create some space in addition to getting off one of the worst contracts in the league right now.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate that no one's really surprised. If you follow Jonnu Smith in Tennessee, you can't be surprised that he's not panned out here. Where in Tennessee, there was nobody there, and he still could not be the focal point of that offense. He's been a complete and utter failure. Part of that offseason where they spent money recklessly and really did not get a whole lot of return for it. I'm all for getting him off the books just to get even a young drafted tight end, Andrew, like into that spot. And it's a warm body would do more than Jonnu Smith is doing, who's maybe his career highlight is that one catch he had in the one catch game the Patriots had in Buffalo last year, that athletic play that he made. Yeah. I'm with you. I would get rid of him in a second, would not affect this team one iota for the next 2 years.
Is that too much, though, for you? A 3rd round pick? Like, you're not – the money for Jonnu isn't as big as it was for Brock Osweiler, though proportionally maybe it's a little bit different, accounting for inflation, yada, yada, but not thinking about this too hard. Like, would you get off a late 3rd round pick?
I think the reason why it's not too much is because what is that? What's the opportunity cost? Like, who is not playing because they've got to feel like they have to play Jonnu Smith because they paid him X amount of money. So it's already a sunk cost to them. If they're going to, we have to play him because we paid him, then get him off the roster. No, and that's one of Bill Belichick's strengths, by the way, is acknowledging when something has not worked. And it feels like right now the official John O. Smith is not working here. It's been a couple of years. They've tried a million different things, get him going out of the backfield, get him going in motion, handoffs behind the line of scrimmage. They've tried everything. It's not working here. So no, I would bite the bullet and trade a draft pick to get him off the books, because I am sure they can find somebody else to be more productive than what John O. Smith has given him in that spot, even if it means eating money for a year or two to make it happen.
All right, I'm going to count that as a win.
Yes, win for you.
On. So, all right, so you tease this. My 1-year plan, which the working assumption here is, okay, this is a F them picks, all in, Rams mentality. Bill Belichick's career has gotten bad news from the doctor. It's terminal. He's out in February 2024. Everything is about making the Super Bowl in 12 months. That's it. It doesn't matter. Things in the future, for all intents and purposes, are non-existent. Now, obviously, we talk about draft. Mayo would take over. His 2 sons are going to coach. But his time in New England is done. This would never happen. I do not subscribe to any of this theory, this approach. The Patriots would never take an F them picks, all in mentality. But again, this is fun. It's Super Bowl week. Get your own podcast. What I would do if I were the Patriots and I had a 1-year plan to get to the Super Bowl or else, Aaron Rodgers, come on down. You got to trade for the best quarterback available. The rough framework for this would be the Russell Wilson trade. Yes, one of the worst trades in NFL history. For a refresher course, and we're going to get through the contract stuff, which took up way more of my day than it should have. 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, a 5th-rounder, Drew Lock, Shelby Harris, and Noah Fant for Wilson, and a 4th-round pitch, which I don't know about you. I would love to know the haggling that went on between Denver and Seattle when it came to 2 firsts, 2 seconds. We need a 5th, too. We need a 5th. No. Well, if we're giving you Wilson and a 4th, it's got to be a 5th. And then, obviously, that deal happens. Wilson gets an extension. This is complicated, okay? It's not a 1-for-1 deal. Yeah. Wilson is younger. He's worse. He was worse at the time, even especially with Rodgers coming off another MVP. He was traded with 1 year left in his deal. Rodgers, again, of course, older, still better, has a few years left in his deal with his extension, which gets complicated. But before I go through any of that and run down some numbers, your reaction to Aaron Rodgers, Patriots quarterback, you're shaking your head. Okay.
The reaction is, you can give me all the numbers you want. I'm still going to mock the hell out of this. No, I don't. He has hijacked the Packers. He would come here and hijack the Patriots. And this past weekend, like, even if you are the most supportive Aaron Rodgers Packers fan, this guy's at the Pro-Am telling Amanda, I forget her last name. That's not Zalatoris, but Ballator. I forget her name on CBS. But he's over and over all these teams. He likes New York. The Raiders fans are loud. Like, he's publicly saying, I'm not going back to Green Bay. He is still their quarterback. So he's going to be traded. He's going to help some team win. But there's been other guys who've come in on like 1 year, like Phillip Rivers to Indy, just went in, shut up, go there, make a playoff run. If they had to do that in the Andrew Callahan end of the line scenario, Super Bowl or bust, there are other quarterbacks who maybe you're not as likely to get there, but they could play at a level that would be almost there and not be the same a-hole factor as Rodgers. So no, especially when you consider the early returns in that Russell Wilson trade. You're so right. One of the all-time, it looked great at the time. Denver got their guy a year later, and it's a disaster for that team. So there's enough smoke there to say there's a fire. I don't want Rodgers. I don't want his McAfee interviews, his dating random celebrities, his complaining about the offense. No. Whatever it is, whatever those drugs he's doing. No part of him. And I can't believe somebody like you, a level-headed Patriots beat guy, is even spitting this out there into the ether today. You're out of your mind.
I'm going to tell you 2 things to see if they change your mind.
Yeah.
One, HBO calls the league and was like, okay, it's Belichick's last year. Rodgers is there. Rodgers versus Bill O'Brien is really going to turn some heads whenever they inevitably blow up. Can we do Hard Knocks? And the league says, yes, you can do Hard Knocks, training camp, preseason, and in season. That's a yes. You get a behind the scenes glimpse of this whole thing.
I watch it, but that's 2 different things. I thought we were building out, like, trying to get there. That would be
we are trying to get there. The second part,
it would sidetrack the whole thing. I would love to watch it, but it would not help the entire.
So this is Mutt, radio host hat on. The GM hat is off, and Hard Knocks is not enough to sway you for 1 year.
Please. Radio host?
Yes,
so
yes.
I will pick up Rodgers from the airport. I'll do his laundry for a year.
That's what I wanted to hear.
Okay.
The Dwight Schrute deal. Yeah. So the other thing I was going to tell you is that if they do, or whatever team trades for him, the question is obviously the contract. And the contract is massive. It's one of the more complex deals in the entire league, which is going to, of course, affect as well as his market and how many suitors and the level of interest, what leverage Green Bay has in those talks and the return they'll get. Again, the very rough framework I put out there, something the Patriots would never do. This is never going to happen. I'll say it again, but let's have a little bit of fun. The deal with Rodgers' contract, first and foremost, is that whatever team he's with has a decision between March 15th, which is the start of the new league year, the start of free agency, and the day before the Packers' first regular season game to pick up an option. And what this option does is basically extends the contract. It adds a couple of years on there. And what it does is also reduce his 2023 cap hit, so this upcoming season, to $15.8 million. So forget about cash flow. Just talk about the percentage of your cap that you're occupying. $15.8 million, call it $16 million at a 225, which is going to be the cap this year, for Aaron freaking Rodgers is a hell of a deal. The issue is the only way you pick up that option is if you drop off a bag of 58 guaranteed $1 million at his front doorstep, because he's actually getting paid a whole lot more in 2023. But again, it reduces the cap hit on the books, which then gets spread out over future years. So naturally, his cap hit goes up in 2024 and 2025. We don't care about that. So the other part about this window, which again, the team that has him needs to make a decision on this. If you trade for Aaron Rodgers in that window, you get the decision on the option, but you're probably going to pick it up because you want Aaron Rodgers and not $60 million on your cap in one single year, is that if you do this after June 2nd, the Packers, who are still going to be left with dead money, get to split it up between this year and next. And before I lose everyone, I'll just say that if you do the Packers that solid and say, we'll do this deal in June 2nd, hold on to X amount of cap space, and have a handshake deal, that will lower their asking price, surely, assuming other teams aren't willing to do that. So maybe it's not the 2 firsts and the 2 seconds and the 5th and the 3 players for blah, blah, blah. Maybe it's a 2024 first round pick, which we don't care about much in this scenario. Maybe it is 2 second round picks. Devontae Parker, you need a receiver, and pick another middle-ish kind of young player. I'd put Josh Uche down, assuming the Patriots might get outpriced with his free agency in 2024. People like Josh Uche. I just think they could grab a guy in day 2 who might provide that same sort of speed rush, though we once thought that about Josh Uche in 2020, and 3 years later it finally happened. I just think if you're going to go all in for 1 year, you need an elite quarterback. You get him at that kind of price. Again, the cash flow is, thank God the Kraft's pockets are as deep as they are. There's a world in which it works. And it sounds like it might for all the teams you just talked about, the Jets, the Raiders. That's what they're sifting through when you talk about an Aaron Rodgers deal, which is not going to happen in New England. But we can. And
in your scenario, by the way, so this is Belichick's last year. So this is Bill. Yeah. Okay. And so in his final year, he has to sort of genuflect at the altar of this, ridiculous egocentric quarterback. That's the other part. It's
a love fest. Have you seen them?
No, yeah. When he's not on the team, and it's great how Bill loves these guys who are not here, and they show up like, he loved Randy Moss for a year, and that thing wore out its welcome. This is only for a year, so the short window works. You made the money work, and you could potentially sell me on some of the football reasons why it would work. But then I imagine Bill Belichick in his final season, sort of turning it over to Aaron Rodgers. With Mac Jones sitting on the bench, watching Rodgers play. I would love to see it, but I can't advocate for it if our plan is to help them win. As the talk show host, sign me up. As the GM guy, I have to veto this trade. I'm sorry.
Yeah, emphasis, 1 year plan. But it took up too much of my day where I couldn't spit all that out. So we shared that. All right, you have to go soon. We have Super Bowl bets, Philly -1.5. You have a prop that you love. I think you've already given it out or put money down. Tell us first which way you're leaning, which team, and then get to the prop.
I look forward to your take on this game too. Hopefully you've thought about this game. So we're taping this on Tuesday afternoon. Where I am right now, and I don't think I'll be moved off this position, but I'm on Kansas City plus the points with no real feel for the over/under. And a general game take will be, for me specifically, I think the Eagles had a very easy road to get here. I think the Kansas City Chiefs experience in big games like this is going to pay off. And I look at some of the smaller pieces to that. Steve Spagnuolo, defensive coordinator for Kansas City, has a history in big games against Tom Brady, by the way, of finding something to shut down a high-powered offense. Eagles' offense is high-powered, but I'm not sure Jalen Hurts is healthy. And I'm not sure they faced a very tough road to get here. In the NFC Championship game, they were gifted Josh Johnson at quarterback for 3/4 of that game. And it was still 7-7 or 10-7, whatever it was, before he fumbled the ball there before halftime. It was a game until then, and then it wasn't anymore. So to me, the 2 weeks a major advantage for Kansas City, given their history here. It gives Mahomes a chance to heal. We saw he had a bulky ankle in that AFC title game. I think he'll be, I won't say 100%, but I don't think he'll be completely hampered where it's going to be a major issue. 2 weeks, coaching staff experience in. No team has an easier path to get to a Super Bowl than Philadelphia's had. They can't change their schedule, but they had an easy schedule and then caught Brock Purdy, banged up in the NFC title game. So with the chance to get the best quarterback of his era, not named Brady, getting points in a Super Bowl, I've got to back Kansas City. So from a game standpoint, Kansas City plus 1.5. If you want to do that, it's minus 110. If you want to take them on the money line, it's minus 105. I think I found a genius way to take that opinion, which is Kansas City wins the game, and turn that into plus 125, plus 30, and that is Patrick Mahomes to win the MVP. Now, I understand that the MVP of the regular season is a quarterback award. The Super Bowl is a little bit different. We've seen non-quarterbacks win. But I keep playing this thing out, and there's just so few scenarios where the Chiefs win here, Andrew, and Mahomes is not the MVP. And 2 times recently, okay, Mahomes involved in one of them, by the way. 2 times recently, an offensive player in a Super Bowl had an MVP performance and did not win. James White in the Patriots Super Bowl did everything he possibly could to win. They still gave it to Tom Brady. A couple of years ago, Damian Williams did everything you could possibly do to win the MVP in the Super Bowl. They still gave it to Mahomes. So I hate to bag on your brethren, but those Diet Coke sucking media guys up in the booth, they get blinded by quarterback.
It's Diet Mountain Dew, Mutt. Get it right, please.
My Diet Mountain Dew. Sorry. They have to they pass that thing around. They go, the quarterback winning team's the MVP. Yeah. And so to me, if I like Kansas City and I want to bet them, I can get more value out of betting Mahomes at plus 125 or plus 130. It's available plus 130 at MGM Springfield right now out in Western Massachusetts versus betting the Kansas City Chiefs to win the game. That being said, I think there's one other player in Travis Kelce who could theoretically win the MVP. We need like 3 touchdown receptions, 100+ yards, maybe a game winner. He could do it. Well, here's the good thing for you. He's like 12-13 to 1. So you can bet, let's call it 80% of what you want to bet on the MVP on Mahomes, if you agree with me, and then back that up with 20% on Kelce and still set yourself up to win the sort of same amount of money if the Chiefs win. So, of course, if the Eagles win and Jalen Hurts is great or it's a low-scoring game, maybe I don't win. If Chris Jones has 6 sacks of Jalen Hurts and get 2 picks, I don't win. But I think the Chiefs win this game. It's a game they get into the 20s, and Mahomes throws 3 touchdowns. You're getting better value on him to win the MVP. So for me, my biggest stance today, and there'll be a couple more bets I'll make between now and Sunday, Mahomes to win the MVP. And again, people are gonna hear this on Wednesday or Thursday. We don't know yet, Andrew, about the Kansas City wide receivers. Right. Mecole Hardman's not going to play. Juju's banged up. Tony's banged up. He said last night at media night he's going to play. But as you get clarification on that, maybe you can find the one guy who's very healthy. If you get word that so-and-so is close to 100%, he's going to play a lot. They might be worth playing on props and sort of reception totals and over-under stuff like that. But I don't have the info yet to do it. And so this early in the week, I can tell you for sure, Mahomes MVP for me, a sprinkling of Kelce MVP. I like the Chiefs to win the game over a team in Philadelphia that wasn't lucky to get here, but they got a pretty sweet path to get here.
That is all very well said, and I'm glad we disagree because agreeing would make for a less interesting podcast. My thing for me is I like the matchup and the way you said, these are very deserving teams. In my opinion, these are the 2 best teams in football, particularly the way you look at the way they finished the season. Injuries obviously playing a factor for Kansas City, but they're healthy, like you're not taking anyone else in the AFC. This matchup speaks, as so many others have, including their Super Bowl against the Bucs, the power of a great quarterback and how much he can paper over and overcome versus a well-built, well-rounded roster like you have in Philly, which is not driven by the quarterback. He does drive the run game. He does so much. I'm not here to diminish Jalen Hurts, but the reason they thrive so well is because of the talent around him, like A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, and perhaps the league's best offensive line. Yeah. I think there are too many matchup issues for KC to overcome unless they get an early lead and force Jalen Hurts to play a little bit of catch-up and be a little more uncomfortable because, as you said, Philly has not had a lot of experience being uncomfortable. In the areas that I look at, you mentioned Kelce. Philly is 6th against tight ends by defensive DVOA this season. The Kansas City defense is 31st by DVOA against number 1 wide receivers, being obviously A.J. Brown. Now, their corners have come along. They play a lot of rookies. It's just I look at those matchups, plus the offensive tackles for Kansas City, and it's not as bad as it was in that Bucs Super Bowl. Okay, all the injuries and whatnot. But Philly's coming with waves and waves and waves of pass rush. They're really good in the interior, a little bit less so a tackle. And I think that's where you might get in kind of strip stack territory. And the KC might be able to dam up a lot of that. I just think one of those dams is going to break at receiver, over the edge and offensive tackle, or a turnover. They're trying to force something to Kelce, who, you know, again, has overcome all this attention all year long. But I like Philly against the spread, obviously straight up. Then it's just, I think it's going to be a hell of a game. The first quarter is going to tell us a lot.
Well, you mentioned the first quarter. I mean, that's the other thing Kansas City has going for them, because Philadelphia has had all these leads, like all year. They're an awesome first half team. The Philadelphia Eagles are 4th in the NFL in first quarter scoring. The Chiefs are 5th. So I don't think Kansas City is going to be bombarded by Philadelphia early. I think they'll be able to withstand it. And then for me, you bring up a great point. How does Philly respond if they are trailing, 10-3 at half? Like, how do they end up bouncing back? How do they push back? So that chess match early on is going to be super important. And if Kansas City does fall behind, they're not Brock Purdy and the 49ers. They have the firepower, even with kind of a substandard wide receiver group, to end up making some plays late in the second half. So I think if Philadelphia falls behind, I'd feel pretty good about Kansas City. If Kansas City falls behind, I'm not going to rule them out because they have enough offense and they still have Mahomes to make a run. And I'll be watching those wide receiver injuries all week to see who might step in the void of Mecole Hardman, who got, I think, 3 catches and a couple of carries in the game, the AFC title game. So they've got some touches to make good. Could it be the rookie Sky Moore, who they loved back in training camp and sort of flatlined during the year? Is this the game that they unleash him? They've got Noah Gray, who I gave out as touchdown prop last time we talked. That, of course, did not hit. They've got other backup tight ends, Jody Fortson, Blake Bell. They got other guys they can go to there. So I cannot wait for this matchup. I'm with you. It's a good game, but I'm glad we're on different sides of this thing.
The other thing for me with Philly is the run defense of Kansas City, which is, 15th by DVOA. You look over the last 6-7 weeks, it's down to 23rd, which has me a little worried, and all this optionality and different looks. It's not quite like playing the Ravens or Navy in college football, but it's a different look that might take them time to adjust to. Granted, the counter is they have an extra week to prepare. They can do that. They can bring in different scout team quarterbacks, whatever you want. It's just something where Kansas City is going to have to scheme up some stops against that running game, because I just don't think their personnel is suited to do it down after down after down, let alone against a running attack like this. But again, Mahomes is just so good, where if he can escape the rush and extend plays, a lot of those advantages just kind of dissipate, because either he catches up to you on offense and can keep pace in a shootout, or he'll do something that you just aren't built for your own self on offense, and finds those gaps in the zone or some mismatch because someone springs free, because that's what happens when it devolves down to backyard football and no one in the league, even Josh Allen, is as good as Patrick Mahomes, when you're just kind of slinging in the backyard with your guys. Do you have time for a mailbag, or should we bounce?
I got 5-10 minutes. I still got left for you, buddy.
Okay, 5 minutes. Let's run through. We got 3. All from Twitter. You can always follow us at Pat's Interpod. This stupid Twitter limit of all the changes. We need one extra character. This could be at Pat's Interference. It's not. It's Pat's Interpod. This comes from Marco. He wants to know, with the recent hiring of Adrian Klemm, are there any Oregon offensive linemen or players in general we should look out for in the upcoming draft? Oregon's offensive line allowed 5.
Marcus Mariota.
Yeah.
Draft him. Is he available? Oh, different. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Draft expert Mike Mutnansky coming in with Marcus Mariota to watch for the 2023 NFL.
Yes.
My short answer is no, not exactly. I mean, there are Oregon players you're going to hear about. That was a very talented team. Like I was starting to say, they allowed 5 sacks last season, fewest in the FBS. Christian Gonzalez, a corner, could be in the mix with Devin Witherspoon and Joey Porter Jr. I would just say the intel on Pac-12 players including edge rushers, is going to be obviously very valuable. So I wouldn't hone in on Oregon so much as the Pac-12 is going to get obviously better intel through Klemm, which this also ties into the West Coast scout for the Patriots, is typically their greenest in the scouting department. So it's not that they don't trust him. It's just that guy has an experience, and any more intel you can add to that region, which isn't typically totally fertile for NFL players, is going to be valuable. So I think if there's value to be mined, maybe day 2, day 3, that's where you lean on Klemm, but their draft plan doesn't totally change, at least in my opinion, even with good talent there, because you got Oregon's offensive line coach.
They need offensive line help, whether they draft in the first round or not. Hopefully he can coach them up because Matt Patricia did not do that last year.
Yeah, it's a very deep offensive tackle class too. So if they don't take day 1 or day 2, and they take someone that Klemm is familiar with, we'll have more of those names. I'm also trying not to spoil for as long as they can the draft content, but the combine's coming up and we're gonna do it.
That's good because I've not done the deep dive yet. See, you're on it. You have to start. Well, I'm not in the position where I have to start looking at this stuff yet. So I am so ill-equipped. Other than I would like the Patriots to maybe get the kid Flowers from Boston College. That's my draft analysis as of today.
Excellent. Well, then this question is for you.
Oh, good.
Lawrence spelled with a U like Lawrence Peroni. If the Patriots stay at 14 and Witherspoon is still on the board, Mutt, do they take him?
Yes, definitely. That's for you. Go.
I know, right on the spot. I already professed my love for this kid. I've watched 2 games and I've had enough. And our friend of the pod, Danny Caley from The Ringer, who we're going to try to have back this year, nice. Wrote even more glowingly than I would have based on those 2 games that I watched of his. He's sticky in man-to-man. He hits like all hell. He can get a little grabby in coverage. Sometimes those over-aggressive types, I think the Patriots just steer clear of, figuring, those are harder habits to coach out. But it's just talent's undeniable and he's a ton of fun to watch. So I would say personally, yes. Last one, Mace wants to know, do you see the coaching staff expanding further with a number of assistants for the position coaches? The position coaches are pretty much filled. There's still some shuffling to be done. Joe Judge, what is his new job? And this assumes that I mentioned Will Lawing, assistant from Alabama, before that the Texans and Penn State, fills in for Nick Caley, who left to go coach the Rams. I could still see them adding some underlings that Bill O'Brien likes and knows and potentially to develop, because we talk about development of players all the time. The development of coaches matters almost just as much. Do you think they add more? They typically have a small staff, but maybe this builds out a little bit.
See, I don't know if they're going to add more. I do think there's got to be some clarification, and maybe you've already heard what they're going to do at special teams. We talked about Cam Acord earlier. They've had a 2-year drop-off. They've got a guy in-house in Joe Judge that did it, I think, at a high level when he was here before he went to New York. So to me, forget expanding it. Figure out who the special teams guys, figure out what his role is going to be. I'm in favor of the question was expansion. Some new voices, Andrew. This is not Bill Belichick's thing. He's not going to do this. But I would love to hear they brought in some guys that aren't from the Belichick tree and got some new ideas, an influx of new blood instead of, guys that Bill knows. And whether it's Klemm, Sean Jefferson, all great names, terrific. At some point, your view is too narrow. So expand. How about just some new voices? That's what I like to see, whether it's one or 2 guys on each side of the ball, guys who aren't directly tied to Bill because of football or lacrosse or something else, that have a different view of maybe the current, more modern era of the NFL. That's what I like to see.
Or maybe we need more lacrosse. Let's get some middies in here. Let's get some long sticks. Let's start looking at corners, the slot corners or short sticks on offense. Let's mix this the hell up. No, but I'm with you. I'm someone generally in favor of the diversity of ideas. I think the Patriots have suffered from that lately with the coaching staff. Like you said, where are the new ideas coming from? And they're not the only franchise to deal with this. Again, this is not picking on Belichick or the Patriots specifically. You have the same coach in the same room who thinks he knows better. It's adapt or die in the NFL. You need to evolve. To evolve, you need some new ideas. Bill O'Brien will bring some from Alabama. Beyond that, maybe we do have some more brain power in New England. And if they do come in, it sounds like they will get paid, because Adrian Klemm, I believe, will be making well north of $1 million based on his salary at Oregon last year and the fact that reportedly he got a pay bump. So now the Patriots are paying for people.
No. It'll be fun unless they do that really dumb thing you suggested and trade for Aaron Rodgers. That's what we don't want to see. But it's not only is it fun, it is really important. I think that even in Belichick, we trust people. They're done with the mulligans for Bill. So it's like, Bill, figure it out. 3rd-year quarterback, back in the playoffs, back in contention. I feel like that's the expectation. I hope we get in the next couple of months here, Andrew, you're in front of Bob Kraft, and just like last year, he sort of lays down the gauntlet and says, we expect to be a playoff team again, and just sort of reset where this thing is going over the next 1 or 2 years, unless they trade for Aaron Rodgers. And that's
Hey, 4 years without a playoff win. It's bad. It's bad. 25 and 26 the last 3 years. Belichick wasted a season. Like some folks out there thought he skated on that. I thought the back page of that story saying he effed us, and the last line being the greatest coach of all time brought about a wasted season was enough. Let alone the fact that it's implied that he hired all these people, watch this happen, let it happen, perpetuated day to day. You're absolutely right. This all falls at his feet, and that's about it. So thank you for taking some extra time. We have to get back on track. Good job by us. And, we'll see what comes to the draft and free agency. But this was fun, man.
I can't wait, man. I hope you're dead wrong about the Super Bowl, but I'm sure we'll text. And UConn's got a big one against Marquette on Tuesday night. We'll be talking during the game, buddy. Thank you. You guys, you do a great job, buddy. Congratulations on the story you and Karen had, story of the offseason, and glad to be back with you.
Thanks, my guy. Go Huskies. The Pats Interference Podcast is powered by Athletic Greens. Build a foundation for better health with AG1.